I was just going for it and not letting myself be, both put off by like, oh, that job's not good enough for me, or the other way, like, oh, I don't think I'm qualified for that job. I just kind of wiped the slate clean, and I just thought, what's out there, and what do I need to do here?
Hey Zouk family, welcome back to the Zouk Digital podcast. This week is an incredible catch for us. I was sent an article recently, fired a former colleague of mine and said, you must speak to this woman. She is definitely someone that I would love to hear more about. This woman is Wendy Ong, born in Malaysia, from Singapore, over in the USA, making huge waves as president of tap music, looking after some of the biggest names we know, and especially out of Genting Highlands, we all remember the very special moment that Dua Lipa took the stage for Good Vibes. She is a cult hero in Malaysia, and Wendy works incredibly closely with her. First and foremost, Wendy, how are you?
I'm good. It's a very stressful week, I think not just in America, but around the world with the election. So I'm glad that we were able to set aside some time that I am not staring at the TV, watching the same thing being, played out over and over again, or refreshing my phone. So this is a nice break, nice distraction.
I totally agree with you. I've been clicking refresh non-stop, seeing what's happening, but it isn't over yet. Firstly, thank you so much for taking the time late evening to talk to us. And second of all, you are a phenomenal inspiration. As I said, I received this article. We reached out to you so quickly and so kindly offered to chat to us. Wendy, can I please ask you, for the benefit of the rest of our listeners here in Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Vegas, who is Wendy Ong and how did you become such a monumental success?
Oof. Okay. Well, like you said, I was born in Malaysia, and I come from a relatively poor family, I think. My dad was a customs officer for the Malaysian government, and my mom was a stay-at-home mother until basically our finances got pretty tight, and she went back out to work when I was probably 12, I think, and she started cleaning hotel rooms and bathrooms and all that. So, I think it's the typical immigrant kind of story, right? Where my parents worked very hard, sacrificed everything, unfortunately their time as well. So that there was a lot of, relatively poor family. We had I shared one bedroom with my brother and my two sisters growing up, and we only had a bunk bed. So there was a rotation, like two people had to sleep on the floor on mattresses, and the other two would get the bunk bed, and we would rotate. So but to be honest, when I say it, I have very, very fond memories of growing up in Malaysia and Singapore. We're a very tight-knit family, and I was actually very, very young when I first fell in love with music, and I do have a distinct memory of it, even though it's a bit cheesy. I just remember my dad hoisting me up and letting me, hit the play button on our 8-track that we had, because this is quite a long time ago. And my favorite song, I guess, at that time was ABBA's Dancing Queen. And from there on, I think, when I was in school, I knew I wanted to be in music. I would obsessively listen to the BBC at night, and I had my finger on the record and stop button. That was my music education, because I wasn't satisfied with the music that I was hearing on air, both in Malaysia and Singapore, because it was all very top 40 music. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I guess, at that age, I was very keen to listen to different types of music, and I found that with the John Peel sessions, on the BBC. So that was That was my education. And I think I figured out very, very quickly, too, that I didn't want to be on stage. I don't like to be the center of attention. And it really was going to Neon Polytechnic after junior college that I found my place and realized that I wanted to be in the business of music. And I say that because I went to really good schools in Malaysia and in Singapore. And to be very honest, I really hated school. I did well enough, but it really wasn't for me. I was always quite aloof, and I was always one of those people that only really like crammed the night before the exam, that kind of thing. And just, I know we hear this a lot. I just never really felt that I fit in. I wasn't the popular girl in school. And, I guess I just really feel fortunate that I ended up at the Polytechnic and started learning things like under the mass communication module, that I realized like that's really something that I could apply to the music business. And was lucky enough to join the Polytechnic's first ever radio station. It was our version of college radio, in Singapore, but it was the first one that actually, it was called Radio Heatwave, and you could actually listen to it on air. So it was kind of a big deal being in Singapore at that time. But yeah, it was really good. Got to go to the record labels and pick up CDs to play on air, and it kind of segued into a job offer before I graduated from school. So I didn't really get any time off, and just kind of, I think I graduated on a Friday and started work on a Monday. It was something like that. It was something ridiculous like that. But yeah, there you go.
It's phenomenal. I remember very well coming from London with John Peel. I would sit there and I would have my tape recorder, and like you, I would wait for him to get through the rambling of what song was coming next to record, and that was the first ever mixtapes, I guess.
Exactly. And I love making those mixtapes. It's really funny, right? When David Bowie passed away, it was last year, wasn't it? Because everything seems so long ago now, prior to the pandemic. And my sister was saying to me, like, yeah, I just remember growing up and I would hear, David Bowie in our house. Mom and dad really loved his music. And I just went, what are you talking about? That was all of me. How could it have been mom and dad? Think about it. Like my dad's favorite record was, like he had a really eclectic vinyl collection, but he definitely was not listening to David Bowie.
You've named some great artists. I mean, I absolutely loved ABBA, the Bee Gees. I love funk and the original, what I would call the original house music back in the day. It's such an uplifting, Saturday Night Fever style.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. And I remember that being played at home, and I would always, even as a small kid, just be jumping around dancing. And then when I learned the old Saturday Night Fever dance, it still comes out to this day, to be honest.
Amazing. Absolutely.
So that's Malaysia and Singapore chapter of your life, and now you're in America looking after some of the biggest artists in the world. How did that come about?
Well, I guess when I was working in Singapore, I was sent to Hong Kong on a business trip. It was a conference that I attended. And I hadn't been out of the country very much. I think that was only my second time out of the country. And when I say that, I don't mean Singapore and Malaysia, obviously. And when I came back, I said to my, family and my then boyfriend, like, well, that's it, I'm moving to Hong Kong. And I think that everybody was a little incredulous that I just randomly made that announcement, and I had to say it, because sometimes you have to say things out loud and let people know so that you're accountable and you have to actually take action and make something happen, and so I did. I did a really good job in Singapore, and there was a specific project that got the attention of our regional office in Hong Kong, and the head of the regional office heard about me, and he was like, oh, I need to meet this person and hear how she came up, how this project came together. And he asked me if I would move to Hong Kong. And, I don't think that was really how I thought I would get that opportunity. But, the door opened and I jumped at it. And I think, and another amazing thing was the company paid off my student loan. So it was absolutely the right decision to make. And at that time, like, I was still living in that one bedroom with my two sisters and my brother, and I was already working by then. So you can imagine, like, I just was desperate to have my own place. And I knew at that time my parents weren't as progressive yet. They were still quite conservative. I had to break a lot of rules. So I knew that really the only way I could leave home was to not just move out of our HDB flat, but to actually move to a different country. So I spent a couple of years in Hong Kong, and in a previous life, I got married, moved to New York without a job, but I did not let that deter me, and I really just like did the cold calls, knocked on doors. I asked my bosses in Asia if they could help me with, help me get my foot in the door with meeting some very, very important people. And I was lucky enough to have a meeting at Arista Records then. And somehow, got hired to work for Clive Davis's label. It was a real honor. And I still don't, people ask me, like, how were you qualified for that job? And I absolutely have no idea. I think it was really more enthusiasm and just, like I'm still perplexed by it sometimes, because if you think about it, like, it's New York City, it's Arista Records, and they were massively successful at that time. It was like the early 2000s, right? And I had just moved to New York from Asia, had very little experience, working anything outside of the Asian market. But lo and behold, within 2 weeks of getting the job, I was in Paris with Puff Daddy, as he was known then, P. Diddy. And that was really like off to the races from there on. I distinctly remember, like, just being in Paris and not knowing what on earth was going on. And I was not familiar with hip hop culture. I really wasn't, because, a lot of that is banned in Singapore. So I didn't grow up on Public Enemy. I didn't, Run the more commercial stuff, like Run DMC and all that. Yes, I knew that, but I had no clue. But there you go. So it was big. I had to figure things out really quickly, and for whatever reason, I was readily accepted into the fold by a lot of the artists that I was working with, and it was all hip hop. And I think I was just an anomaly at that point in time. Like, I think a lot of my artists, like, a lot of them were rappers, obviously. They just didn't know what to make of me, but they knew I got things done, and they knew that I would fight for them, and I wasn't afraid to, like, express my opinion, and I made them laugh, and that's always helpful. And, the one thing that I picked up on very quickly was I did international marketing. So my job was to make sure that their music was promoted and marketed around the world. And that involved a lot of promotion trips, right? Going overseas with the artist. So I quickly realized that, when you take someone out of their comfort zone, they become quite, they need some reassurance. They don't, if you're going to London for the first time, or Berlin, you don't have people, you don't know where to get the best meal, for example, or how to communicate with people, even though everyone's speaking English to you. So I very quickly learned how to, in some ways, I was almost like a babysitter just making, because my goal was to make sure that we got the work done, and it was by any means necessary as far as I was concerned, and it was balancing, them wanting to just chill out or go sightseeing sometimes, with actually getting some work done.
It must have been. I mean, you and I have a lot of elements that resonate. I'm like you, expat. Second, came to a culture I had no idea about. Third, when I first started working nightclubs, I was a public schoolboy being dropped, and our busiest night was a hip hop night. I was definitely a fish out of water. I mean, there was occasions I was the only white guy in the room, let alone a posh white guy at that. And it's amazing how you find yourself, but I think what you've clearly done is you adapt fast, right? And you get through based on your principles of hard work, and people respect you not for what you don't understand, but for what you can do. And that must have been, you must have been very popular with them, because you are also different to them, and they can learn a lot from you. So it must have been a great transition for you. And also, you must have some phenomenal memories.
I do. I have some great stories that shall not be told on this podcast. I could write a book, but I'm not going to. Let's just put it that way.
Let's lead us to today. So now you're based in the USA. You're looking after some wonderful stars. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Dua Lipa being I think is one of the most admirable young artists today, someone that young people can really look up to, a great role model, obviously a fantastic performing artist. And after many years in the music industry now, how do you find yourself with where you stand today?
I find it interesting sometimes that, you started off this interview saying, somebody found my story inspirational, all that. And I'm very, very humbled by that, because internally, like, I feel like I'm still that same person that, first arrived in New York City, and fast forward, it's the year 2020, and I'm living in Los Angeles, and like I have a really great job that I love very much, and I really enjoy working with my artists. I feel very, very lucky. At the same time, I know that it wasn't luck that brought me here, and I really did pay my dues, and I had a lot of setbacks. And I think that everyone who has had some measure of success in their career can attest to this. But, I feel that I really started to grow when I had to recover from those instances. And I say this because, I worked in 2008 when the music business started to tank, and that was when that was before streaming, and the CD market, was not cutting in. There was a lot of rampant piracy. Then Napster came on the scene, and I was let go from my job, and I hadn't, I'd never not worked in my entire life, because I literally graduated from school and started work right away. So to not have a job after working nonstop, it was quite a shock to my system. And I actually had a really hard time coming to grips with it. Eventually, when I did, I realized that the only way that I could move forward was just to be open to different opportunities, even if it didn't really seem to make sense. And I thought, when I first moved to New York City, it didn't really make sense for me to be hired by Arista Records and then like work with all these incredible artists, right? Like I think back, like between the Foo Fighters and Alicia Keys and the Strokes and Outkast, like I've done, how did I end up doing all that? It was because like I was just going for it and not letting myself be, both put off by like, oh, that job's not good enough for me, or the other way, like, oh, I don't think I'm qualified for that job. I just kind of wiped the slate clean, and I just thought, what's out there and what do I need to do here? So I just started taking informational interviews with anybody that would talk to me. even if they say like, we don't have any openings, I know, but I just want to talk to you. I didn't even know how to write a resume. I mean, this is how bad it was for me. Like I didn't know how to write a resume. I didn't understand the term networking beyond, just, at that time, it was just like a dirty word, almost like networking. Who the hell wants to do that? But, I had to suck it up. And I met a lot of different people that way, and eventually got a job at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City. And I really knew nothing about opera, but it was incredible. I learned a lot. I had to buy a whole new wardrobe because it's very different what you can wear to work at the Met Opera than what I was used to doing, in the music business. And from there on, after a year at the Met, I was headhunted on LinkedIn, funnily enough, which is how you found me. I was asked to be head of classical music at EMI, which was also another stretch for me because I really didn't grow up with a background in classical music. And, I was told by my boss, the CFO of the company, that, he was hiring me, he was offering me the job because of my skill set and my personality, and he was not hiring me because I had a wealth of knowledge of classical music, which I had zero, apart from being in the school band. So I think instances like that like made me realize that the world is much bigger than I think it is. And I really I think I really just had to be brave, and not worry about how people would look at me or talk about me, and just kind of went for it.
I got to be honest with you. I mean, I often get the pleasure of chatting to people that I either eager to or look up to or enjoy the music of, etc. But this is really, really inspiring, and you can be humbled and you can be shy about how our paths met. But you've just summed up exactly why you're inspirational, because you've gone from zero platform to create opportunities for yourself. You've hustled in arguably the hardest city in the world. I mean, the city that never sleeps. You went out and you basically asked people for opportunity, irregardless of whether there was openings or not. And then you've got to where you are today, and it just proves there is no element of luck, because if you hadn't hustled so hard, people wouldn't have known who you are. People wouldn't have thought of you to give you the opportunity. And I think there's a great lesson there. And I always, you jumped the gun for me, because normally I have to ask people for advice for the millennial age group of followers that do follow Zouk, because we are predominantly a millennial lifestyle brand. But you just summed it up perfectly, that creating your own opportunities. And the second is at no point fearing rejection, because it happens to all of us. I mean, I said I have several factors that make this so enjoyable for me. And I was once upon a time married. I moved to Asia knowing one person, and I just wanted a new lease of life. I did the opposite to you. I went from west to east, and when I landed in Asia, my new boss, basically, who'd worked so hard to persuade me to come, walked in and said, "You're the best paid guy here. You better make this work. Otherwise, you'll be on that return flight that we gave you." And that was my first day. And I thought, what have I done? So I went out and I bought all the lifestyle magazines I could find. And I emailed all the editors of all the magazines and went, "This is me. I'm here to open this project." And no one replied until maybe like 3 weeks later. The editor of Esquire emailed me and went, "There's a screening of James Bond in KL. Do you want to come?" And I was like, that's not what I wanted, but I'll go desperately. Took some business cards. And I wore a Union Jack tie that I stole from a university friend. And obviously, being a British guy at a James Bond premiere in a Union Jack tie got me a lot of attention. And from there, my network exploded. And it's just, there is an element like that. If you don't put yourself out there, you cannot receive the luck. And I always say to people, opportunities pass you every day. It's whether you're aware of them or not. Because if you're not aware and you're not looking, they will just pass you by. And you've created a phenomenal career out of hard work and taking your opportunities. So no matter how humbled you are, it is monumentally inspiring. And you've got no excuse to not recognize it, because you've come from very humble beginnings to go and create this amazing wealth of experience and career. And I've loved listening to you So thank you so much for taking the time. I would want to, rather than take your time, because it's gone from light to dark in the windows behind you, so I don't want to keep that. So I just want to ask you, I know there are many stories you can't tell us, but any particular career highlights that you're happy to share? Some things that you'll look back and in that imaginary book that you won't write, that you'll say, these are things that you'll never forget?
Yes, I have a really, really good one. When Outkast won Album of the Year for Speakerboxxx The Love Below at the Grammys, I was backstage. And I think, that was the last award. And as the credits were going up, the guys were like, everybody come on stage. And I was on stage with, Big Boy and Andre 3000 and, and the whole entourage. And I just remember looking into the audience thinking like, this is insane. Never once in my life did I think that I was gonna be, I just kind of reveled in that moment, and I doubt that will ever happen again. But it is quite incredible that I got to be a part of that. It was, especially a hip hop group, like they are really one of the best groups in the world. Like not even hip hop aside, like like they're monumental in what the impact that they've had on the music scene.
That's a phenomenal. That's a great one for the scrapbook. One thing I do want to say, Wendy, before we go is, it's obviously phenomenal to think of the good times you've been through. As you say, you've had knockbacks before, and one of the things that we are trying to do through this digital platform is let people know that not just knockbacks, but rough days are totally acceptable, and it's not alien to feel down sometimes over the smallest things. Obviously, mental health awareness is a massive topic right now, and so it should be. Any advice you have for people who maybe, especially during this year, 2020 has been rough for a lot of people, who might be finding things difficult?
I mean, I am one of the people that you were talking about, frankly. When I never really thought I was one of those people that was susceptible to depression or anxiety. But when the lockdown happened, I started doom scrolling, and I already consume a tremendous amount of news anyway, but it got worse, and I realized that I was really unhappy, and I had to really figure out what steps I could take, to make myself feel better. And I talked about it quite freely. I have weekly Zoom calls with my family in Singapore. They're in Singapore and in Australia, and everybody knew, my parents and my brother and sisters, like they knew I was quite depressed. And I decided that I'm not an alcoholic, but I realized that I was having a couple of drinks a week, and then it became every day, just because my anxiety was through the roof. And I thought, like, well, maybe I need to just take a break. And it's hard, like working in the music business, in the entertainment business, but I thought like I was gonna try it out. I didn't have a rock bottom moment, nothing so bad happened. I just got tired of how I felt. Like I got sick of not being happy and being anxious all the time. So I took a break from alcohol, and it gave me a lot more energy. It gave me a lot more perspective. I also meditate. I know that's kind of a cliche now, but I do meditate twice a day. And if I don't get it in, that's fine. I don't shoot myself about it. But and I exercise, and I really try and control the amount of news that I am consuming, because there's a lot of bad things happening in the world right now. And I try to focus on the things that I can control. Like there are a lot of things happening that I cannot change. So I just look at what I can, make sense of on my end anyway, and make a difference.
Thank you for being so candid and being so honest. I think everyone will have the dark moments and how we all deal with it. And you're not alone. By some people will have a couple of drinks. And I think you came up with a phrase I've not heard before, but I think interesting, doom scrolling. And I find that sometimes the news can be detrimental, because if you have a good experience, you might tell one person, but if you have a bad experience, you'll tell 10. And we know this from, for instance, restaurant reviews. And it's too easy to become immersed in the negativities. But it's phenomenal that you say, and I don't think meditation is a cliche. It's something that we've been pushing through the yoga sessions we put out on Zouk Digital, that being able to control your own thoughts is much more challenging than anything else. And because it's very hard to switch off what happens in your own head. So I think meditation is a great key. I don't think it's cliche at all. Wendy, thank you so much. It's been so much fun and such a pleasure. And first of all, as you say, we reached out to you because someone was inspired by your article, and you so quickly turned around and agreed to talk to us. And we're blessed to have had that opportunity to meet you. And I love it. And I really hope one day in person I can hear more. But it's been a great array of positivity and a great, as I say again, inspiration for people that anything is possible, because of coming from almost no music platform to bolstering yourself into a great career just proves that you don't have to be disheartened at any point.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
And stay safe and take care of yourself. And we can't wait to see what's coming next.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Take care.